Welcome to Permission to Evolve. I'm your host, Brandon Thielk. I'm a performance and life coach.
I'm Holly Deschenes. I am Brandon's co-host and producer for this podcast.
So we're coming off of the 4th of July. And so I thought an appropriate subject today would be permission to be independent. So independence and freedom go hand in hand. I just want to kind of talk through some of those ideas. And, there is this idea of being too independent where we might actually be holding ourselves back in some ways. The hyper independence is usually based on wounds. We're going to go into different dynamics here, the value of being independent, why it's important in certain capacities. And also, we tend to try and balance things out here. So the need for other people in your life and support there. And so we're just going to kind of sort through this and see what we come up with.
Sounds good. This should be good. So we'll do our question of the week, which will follow along with this theme and maybe be a good kickoff to the rest of the podcast. Just as a reminder, just like last week was an Ask Me Anything, if you have a question for Brandon, please feel free to send it to us via DM or email, or if you know one of us personally, you could certainly text it. Any of those things would be great ways to get us a question, or leave it in the comments, any of those things. But anyway, for this week, let's talk a little bit about how you see, what's the difference between independence and hyper independence?
Independence is this ability to kind of be yourself, be an individual. And that's a lot of what we talk about here is, going into different systems in society, whether it's like the corporate world or, even the education system, all these things. There's kind of this blending that goes on, and it starts to filter down ideas where everybody kind of starts to think the same, or we make these different trade-offs of I might not like my job, but it gives me the safety and security of a regular paycheck, like those types of things. They're sacrifices, and sometimes with the entrepreneurial mindset that is generally this seeking freedom and independence, which is one of my primary values. So you have to really align with your value system is, what's important to you. For me, like my ability, freedom and ability to like seek truth and live authentically in alignment with that has been a defining thing for me. But, this idea of hyper independence is usually built on this wound of, maybe I trusted somebody and I got betrayed, or I've just been let down by others a lot. And especially if you're like a driven person or ambitious, generally through that work, you tend to develop a higher capacity than most of the other people around you, that we have higher standards for ourselves and high expectations. And that can make it very difficult to work with others, because we generally, when the ego kind of thinks that everybody's the same as us. So it's more of, it can create problems there, where if I'm going to grow and scale a business, things like that, I need to be able to rely on other people. I need to trust other people. And so I might limit myself if I'm not willing to open up. And if I feel like I need to do it alone, those things present some pretty big problems. And once again, that's usually ideas or beliefs that we form based on being hurt in the past, right? So with this work, we're always trying to clean that up and find the best balance with everything. It's that rebellious spirit. It's that ability to kind of push against the grain and find your own answers and not rely on other people. Like that does build strength. And there's a lot of value in that. That is what makes a lot of high performers. The hyper independence is when that starts to hold you back. I think it's a phase you kind of have to go through, if you are going to create something. But when that starts to be the thing of why you're staying small, that's generally we're in this hyper independence where we don't trust people, where we feel like we have to do it ourselves because nobody else will do it like us, and those types of ideas. And while, some of that may be true, like, if you are building your own company, nobody's going to care as much as you, which is a good thing. But then it's also, I need to be able to at least surrender some things if I want to grow beyond my own limitations. The hyper independence piece is generally built on that wound where when we want to clean that up so that we can continue to expand in new ways. And it's incredibly healing to be able to trust and rely on other people and feel safe that other people will take care of the things that are important to you. And so, yeah, I think hyper independence it's a stage that's necessary, like many of the things we talk about. But then, there is a point where we probably want to grow beyond it. I think people tend to get stuck there, and then it shrinks down their life at a certain point. We have the archetypes of like the lone wolf and things like that. And that's something like I took on for quite a while. That's just, once again, not wanting to get hurt. That's not wanting to open up to other people. And when you start to go through the individuation process and really start to think for yourself and create this space where it doesn't, a lot of times you're caught in the middle where you don't feel like many people understand you because everybody's operating on different rules. So, if you rewire a lot and you think vastly different than most of the population, that brings conflict too. So there's a lot of challenges with this path, but the main idea is independence does equate to freedom, but that freedom goes so far where that might actually be what's like building a prison around us. Everything has a balance to it, and we want to find that right balance. And I would say the wounded version of it that we get stuck in the past is the hyper independence lens.
Yeah, this isn't necessarily a question, but more of an example. There's like if you're in business, there's that, oh shoot, I'm not going to remember the financial term for this, but it's like if you're doing everything yourself, right? But when you do the thing you're really great at, you make, let's say, $250 an hour, but you're spending all this time doing stuff that you would pay somebody $20 an hour to take care of for you. Like you're actually losing
Yeah.
money by not
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and that's kind of those things of, if I get too dialed into I have to do it all myself, um, that can look kind of dumb after a while. Like especially, yeah, after you like find your expertise and it's like highly developed, it's really not worth your time to be in the other areas that you're not good at. There are people that are great at those things. It's just that awareness that, you can only grow so much if it's all by yourself. And we got to expand outward at some point, and we generally have to heal those wounds in order to feel safe in doing so. Because a lot of people don't heal those wounds, and then they become, even if they do start to hire people or get help, now, that's the type of person that would become a micromanager is, they're in this anxiety and fear all the time that they don't have the control. And so something's going to go wrong. And so then they start to micromanage those people that they hired to fulfill those needs for them. That's the importance of doing this work is, and it's just, we want to have realistic timelines with that too. If I'm getting help in an area, there is the onboarding process and coaching somebody through it. Like they don't know my business as well as I do and those types of things. And so you have to be patient, you have to give time and space, and you have to make room for development and getting the person up to speed with your expectations. If you're a high performer, ambitious person, generally the patience is a quality that's lacking. And so that's also another area that we can struggle with is that urgency to continue to push forward. I'm actually dealing with a couple of these cases in my coaching practice. One of them's a lawyer who's hired a bunch of people, like has tried out partners, has tried out like mentorships, like hiring associates, and none of it seems to work well because she operates at such a high level. It's everything feels like it's slowing her down. That's the thing, is these are choices. It's just like, if I don't, you can also be at peace with like, okay, I'm just going to do it all on my own, but you have to know that you're only going to go so far and so big operating that way. And those are trade-offs. So all this stuff is trade-offs. If you want to stay at that level, that's great too. There's no judgment on it. I think, regardless, it's important to kind of clean up the wounds around this type of stuff because it affects all of our relationships. It's not just working relationships. If I don't have that space, I am going to have a hard time having a productive, like romantic relationship, because it's just like I'm always worried about what the other person's going to be doing. That's going to hurt me. It kind of just fuels all that stuff. It's important work to do because it isn't just in the business sense. It does start to sprinkle throughout all our lives and even our friendships. I think it's an important aspect to look at.
I was in a Enneagram session today, and one of the guys in there shared that what drove him towards that type was that he grew up in a really unstable, unsafe home. And so it became about, I have to take care of myself. And I like sometimes I was like, I have to find a place to sleep, or I got to make sure that I've fed myself. And so as he became an adult, like that sort of hyper independence to make sure that he could take care of himself just has continued into his adult life.
Mhm.
So I don't know if you have other examples sort of like that of how that drive can be there to begin with, but yeah, let's just talk a little bit more about like the wound and where this could come from.
That's a common example, and I would say that's probably the more likely example for this type of pattern is coming from a really tough environment where you didn't actually have anybody to rely on, and you had to do everything for yourself. You had to grow up fast. You had to maybe get a job pretty early on and start to take care of yourself. And so bad situations create clarity of you get this clear distinction of like, I don't want to be this way. I want a better life. That can be this powerful driver of like, okay, I'm just going to like separate from everybody here and I'm going to chart my own path. So that's generally kind of the primary version of it is coming from really bad circumstances. The other one would be, some of us, which maybe I had some mixture of was like, I think, you kind of question a lot of things around you. I think, there are certain people like you're kind of born into a family and you feel like an alien a little bit. You feel like nobody understands you. You feel like the way things are done doesn't make a lot of sense. So that, it's kind of like the questioning status quo, I think is another version of trying to conform just like never felt right. And so I think this is true for probably most empathic people. It's really hard to go along with things that don't feel good to you. I think that's the one is kind of the more masculine approach of yeah, this sucks and I got to get out of here. And the other one's kind of more of these things feel off to me. I'm not really sure what to do with this. Like, an example for me was seeing people around me that didn't seem very happy with their lives, where I was just like, yeah, like this doesn't make sense to me to do these things over and over again. And that's what makes up your life is just kind of living the same day and all that stuff. It never was appealing to me. That's what drove more of my sense of independence. Was every time I tried to plug into a system or do the normal thing, it just like felt really off. And I thought it didn't make sense and it was crazy in my mind. That's what drove me to really, okay, I'm going to find my own way. I'm going to, and in that process, it's like impossible for those things to not imprint on you though. Cause a lot of, we're born into these things and we can't really start to filter until, we get a little bit older. A lot of that programming kind of bypasses our rejection of it and we just absorb a lot of it. That's kind of that journey, awakening journey is like I like hang on to those pieces, but I might have to exist in those structures. I might have to go along with things for a certain amount of time, before I have the autonomy to really kind of separate out and rebuild myself. And that was kind of more of my process. So, I think those are probably the two primary roads is you just feel very different and it doesn't click with you to try and blend in or yeah, I'm in a really bad circumstance and I want to get out of here. I think those would be the two versions that would mostly create this type of pattern. And that starts to feed this rebellious spirit too of, in high school, we all know the rebellious teenager that doesn't like to be told what to do. And then you do the opposite. It's just like extreme versions of that of like, I'm going to like go against the grain on like everything. That's that seek for independence, that seek for finding my truth. I don't want to just accept things that are given to me. Like I want to find my own way. And it's a long, hard road and, it takes a lot of extra work, but then you do build this capacity, you build this perspective. And that's say these are separators, right? So, especially being a coach and a business owner, I have to like present how I'm unique. So it's just like by me digging in and running through these things and rewiring myself, like it's created this unique perspective. And so that's what brings value to a certain person that's like seeking these types of things because we have like all the spiritual wisdom. So you could join a religion or you could you know do psychedelics, you could do all these different, you could research Eastern philosophy, like all that stuff. It's like it's kind of that hunger for truth, I think, that drives this version. And there's many ways of seeking that. And, I think they're all valid. But then at the end of the day, if I'm just jumping into another system and everybody thinks the same, I kind of fell into the same trap because now that's where this dependency gets created is when I'm in the system, and because usually systems don't like contradictory thinking. It's like everybody thinks the same and the person that thinks differently gets shamed. If you plug yourself into these things, there's always that's a codependency of we're like absorbed and enmeshed in this similar energy. In that place where we have to sacrifice some individuality for that. Okay. So I lose some of my independence when I rely on the crowd, when I rely on other people to validate me. There's parts of me that I have to give up in order to exist in those situations. And so independence is this ability to stand alone. It's this ability, I'm gonna take my own path here. Like I'm gonna go through the phases of loneliness and needing the connection and like all that stuff. And I'm gonna build myself to not need that stuff. And those are like primary needs that you have to really work through that have very strong impulses because all throughout history we did rely on each other, in tribes and small groups. That's how you stayed alive. And so that drive to be accepted and validated, is a very primal thing. And part of that is like me blending in and people being able to relate to me. So I don't want to be the outcast in those situations, because that could mean death. All that stuff's programmed into our brain and we have to work through it. And that's the thing, we have these kind of weird scenarios now where social media is like this artificial form of connection where people are like lonelier than ever. Everybody's isolated and off on their own. And we think we're getting connection through social media, but it's artificial. It's, a lot of people do just crave the in-person connection at this point because it's kind of running its course. But it's knowing that, and so you're starting to see a lot more strong opinions about things. You're starting to see people with unique perspectives really start to step up. That's because that isolation, it kind of brings that. So when I withdraw, like I have to be with myself. It's either I'm going to sink or swim there. It's either I'm going to get pulled into depression, and sometimes we need to. Depression is how we actually redesign our mind if we see it that way. It's that isolation that really starts to bring this clarity of this is what I truly believe. This is how I truly feel about this stuff. You get to sort through that and develop a unique opinion, which is this independence. So yeah, with the internet, you have all these people that are able to create financial independence because their unique perspective allows them to like monetize that, right? So, it's all pretty interesting. It is overriding a lot of our original drives and really branching out. And as you like get to know yourself at a deeper level, we're shooting for authenticity. And once again, with social media, that's what people are craving now is more authentic. And so it's all this natural flow. But yeah, there's certain problems that come with like needing the group, like, cause now it's just like we're blending in and I don't feel like I can be myself. I have to start to conform to these ideas because the group energy is powerful. It kind of keeps us in line. And so that also drives that seek for independence is it doesn't feel very good when I have to sacrifice what I feel, my beliefs, my value system in exchange for the group. A lot of that stuff creates wounds that drives people towards this. And then once we're on that path, it's good. But then once again, when we take it too far into hyper independence, now I have all these blanket limiting beliefs where I'm shutting down opportunities. I'm not actually connecting with anybody because I don't trust them, and that's all created from the wounds of the times where I felt like I had to sacrifice and give things up that I didn't want to.
Do you think hyper independence is synonymous with wanting to maintain control?
Because control is all built on some sort of deep fear. Fears usually are irrational in terms of like, I might feel like I need to control everything, so other people don't hurt me, but then I might also be like extremely lonely and I might be like craving that. Right. So it's like, it doesn't really solve the problem. It's just a strategy of like what I prefer. Do I prefer my safety or do I prefer connection? Because to connect with others, I have to be vulnerable. I have to be open. If I have a lot of internalized shame, if I have a lot of pain I haven't dealt with, that's going to be creating these scenarios that don't really make sense, where I have internal conflicts that are pulling me one way and then pulling me the other. And And, the longer we're on that road, we convince ourselves we don't need these things. We all have the same basic human needs. Sometimes we need to clean them up before we trust ourselves to open up to other people and have that connection. And yeah, maybe even get to that place of like, oh, I can depend on somebody. If I've never been able to do that my entire life, then, it's going to take some work to get to that point to surrender control where I can actually trust somebody.
So when you were talking through like the ideas of losing independence to join a group and then becoming codependent, you made me think of a lot of the work that I do. We talk about building teams, but we talk about interdependence, which I know is not, hopefully this will come back to independence, but the interdependent is different than codependent.
Yeah, so interdependence is more of those alignments we're talking about. This person does this really well, like this is their lane. If a team's going to work together well, like we all just need to own our lane and we need to work together on it, right? So interdependence is the realization that yeah, there's other things that are best served by other people and I'm able to actually surrender control to them. Okay. So that's that surrendering the ego, humbling yourself, like I don't have that. I'm not operating from the pride of, trying to prove how much I can do or like how valuable I am and I can do all these things because a lot of those things might not be worth my time. And so interdependence is that realization that like everybody works more effective if they're in their strengths. If you get people lined up in their strengths, we can create pretty good results together, right? But I have to be able to stay in my lane and I have to be able to have respect for others and allow them to do what they know how to do. And so, yeah, interdependence it's like the evolution of like codependence is like I need somebody else to validate me and make me feel okay. I can't do that for myself. And so I have all sorts of strategies to try and get that. Okay. So that might be people pleasing. That might be me being like the helper, of like I'm going to go above and beyond for everybody. That, it's just like I'm going to try all these different strategies to get to earn that love and validation. But if I generate that from within, I'm not threatened by other people anymore because I don't feel like I'm not in competition. I don't feel like by them getting praised or them getting highlighted that that's taking away from any of my value. Okay. And that's the hard thing people struggle with is if you have these insecurities and you really need the validation, like you really need credit. And if other people are getting it, now we have jealousy and envy. Okay. And so those are like the codependencies is, I'm still operating in competition. I'm still like needing other people to make me feel good about myself because I'm not generating it from within. In that place, there's exchanges going on of I meet this need for this person, they meet it for me, but it's like done in an unhealthy way where if that person withdraws from me, now I'm going to operate from the ego and I'm going to try to get them back under control. Okay. Because they went them like abandoning me or leaving me made me feel bad things inside. And so I'm associating them with that feeling. When we do a lot of pattern work, especially family dynamics and things like that, it's all these kind of enmeshments, these codependencies. And when you start to withdraw, the other person that was benefiting from it isn't very happy about it. Okay. So then they try to triangulate, they try to do all these things to try and mess with you so that you fall back in line and meet their need again. Okay. But we're all capable of meeting that need ourselves in most cases if we do the inner work. It's like those are just wounds I'm trying to avoid. And I'm holding other people accountable for what I feel. That other person is going to play the other part of that dynamic. And so that's where conflict happens is like both people feel like they're giving something up in order to exist in the relationship. And there's usually a dominant energy that's taking more than they're giving. And so things get off balance. And so that's the codependency is usually built on our wounds and needing other people to make me feel okay so I don't have to feel them. But once I feel them and heal them, now it's like I can operate from this interdependence. I don't feel threatened by other people. You commonly see this, yeah, in like business partnerships too, of one person's doing all the work and the other person's just kind of riding off that. It's not an equal exchange. And so there's always conflict there. But the interdependence would be two people coming together that really own their strengths and know who they are and they operate in their lanes and those lanes complement each other. And they both realize that together they're stronger than each of them by themselves. Okay. And so interdependence takes, humbling the ego. It takes surrendering a lot of those things that are very tough to do early on. It does take an evolved group to be able to operate that way cleanly. And that's why it's like so rare to see it, right? Everybody can talk about it, but it's much more difficult to execute, because anytime you run up against somebody's wounds, like they have all these strategies to make them feel better in the moment, and through manipulation, that's what causes the problems. But if, in a perfect world, if you have people that are healed and yeah, like this is what I like to do, that I do this really well, I don't care about these other things. Now it's like they operate in their lane, and then these other people do what they do well. And them being celebrated isn't that, that's not a slight on me. That doesn't devalue me. They're strong in that area and they should feel good about it. Right. So yeah, they're goals to shoot for. And it takes a lot of work to get there, because most of us do have a pretty strong ego where we kind of need the external stuff to validate us and make us feel okay. But when you make that switch and become more internally focused, you can start to heal all those wounds, really start to set yourself up to actually work well with others. That's what we're talking about, shifting out of the hyper independence and more into the independence, but then interdependence. That's the proper context for that. Is if I've done the work to clean myself up and I realize that, okay, this is where I'm at, and in this I need these other people. Now we can all work together. It's trying to get like the stars to align most of the time, because people are complicated. Most people don't want to get that deep and do that work. But if you kind of have people that are more involved in their thinking and you can get them together, it can work pretty well. But even in the highest levels, like even if you're like people that operate very spiritually, or even in churches, things like that, everybody still has an ego. It takes a lot of work to strip that out, to be like, okay, I'm not going to get bent out of shape about some of these things going on, because a lot of times somebody does need the credit, somebody does need the validation. And if that's given to other people, I think that means less than me, for me.
Would you say, if we're making this move towards this healthier independence, and that interdependence can be like a part of it, right? Like this true freedom is going to come through some of those kinds of places. Yeah. Let's
Yeah.
talk about that.
If you're really wanting to be independent, that's the primary driver, is freedom. But then freedom is also connected to responsibility. Okay. So the more independent I am, the more freedom I want, the more I have to be responsible for. Okay. And so it's the realization that, the bigger you grow, like the more responsibilities you have. I might sacrifice a little bit of freedom in order to get some time back, or to get some energy back, or to just like focus on the things that I love, right? You start to balance it out, because everything starts as generalized thinking of like, yeah, I want to be, and many people, start their own businesses because they want to create freedom, and then, financial and time freedom. But then it's like, yeah, that's all stuff that comes like later on. Usually it's like down the road. Very rarely does that happen pretty quickly. It's like a very long, arduous process, and it's very conscious. Like you have to be mindful of where you put your time. You have to be mindful of how you build things. You have to set up structures to create that freedom. And so a lot of people like start on that path, but then the amount of responsibility that takes, it's just a big burden. It's not that fun. But, if you're able to bear that burden for an extended period of time, like you can create a lot of freedom in your life. And, I think the timeline piece is the thing that everybody struggles with. Everybody wants things faster than they come. And, um, in my apartment building, I run into some of these people in their mid-20s and stuff. And they're just like amazed about my life. And they're just like, I want to live your life. And I'm like, no, you don't. Like, you don't, you don't want to like do what I did to like start to experience. Things are really opening up for me now, but it was a long, hard road. And, these are people that can have good careers right now. They should actually probably take those opportunities and get some experience and learn some things before digging in and being like, oh, I want to be a small business owner, just because it is demanding it. Everything's on you. Like, that's a huge responsibility, especially somebody that's just starting out. So, a lot of these things are trade-offs, and it's that understanding that there is no perfect scenario, and freedom is going to mean different things to you at different stages of your life. It might initially might be, oh, I want freedom to travel the world, but now it's just like, oh, I want the freedom to work from home. I might want the freedom to go on vacation whenever I want, like those kinds of things. But it's like I still need to do the work that makes that possible, right? That's the burden piece. And unless you win the lottery or something, it's there are just certain things that have to happen, and it's finding the right mix for you. So, you can have a lot of freedom working a normal job. You're wise about how you spend your time outside of that, or how you like line up days off and things like that. It's just whatever your definition is and what your value system is, where it's just like, okay, the safety and security of this puts me at ease. So I don't have to worry about all these other details. That creates mental freedom, right? Like I don't have to stress about money, so it's finding that right recipe for you. The drive for independence, it does build capacity, it does build a lot of good things, but it's a very challenging path. And yeah, hyper independence especially, it's we got to switch out of that because it's usually built on something that's not sustainable. Usually there's a lot of not good feelings inside that's fueling all that, and we could really get more freedom back if we're willing to trust other people, if we're willing to function from interdependence, and kind of see the value in that, and surrendering control and working through the fears of that actually could create much more freedom than the other version of I have to do this all alone.
When you're talking about the 20-year-olds in your building and them being like, oh, I want your life, I think there's a significant portion of, people that romanticize this idea of freedom or this idea of independence without fully understanding, to your point, the responsibility that goes along with it. It's fed by movies and TV shows and, trust fund kids and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, independence, freedom, and responsibility are like all one and the same. The more you build your capacity, the more you can be responsible for. I even saw like Damon John, he was on Shark Tank and all that stuff. He was talking about, he got presented this opportunity where a bank was going to like loan him all this money to buy a bunch of companies. And he's like, I would have like 20,000 people working under me. And they're going to give him like $1.3 billion or something to do this. And he's like, I said, no. He's like, I already missed my other kids growing up. Like, he's like, I want to be there for this one. And, I don't want to be doing that the next 20 years. Freedom looks different to him at this stage. Right. And so, I think it's like important to kind of note that what it truly takes, to do some of these things, it's sometimes it's not worth that cost. And so it's having that sense of mind to be like, okay, well, I could do it, but do I want to do it? And obviously he did that for many years. So it's kind of allowing yourself to shift and change. It's shifted from like the financial freedom for him to more of the time freedom. I think it's fair to like divide it up into those categories of like, what's the best mixture for me at this point in my life, at any point. These things aren't simple. They are tough decisions. And so, if you are a person with high capacity and you can bear a lot of burdens, and you've done that for a long time, there might be a point where you don't really want to do that anymore. You've already taken that road, and you might want something a little more laid back now. You have to have that ability to step out of the achiever's mindset or the performance mindset of all that matters is what I can pin my achievements on, and that's what brings me value. But once you do the inner work and you get clear on what really matters to you, like a lot of that stuff starts to fall away, and then the decision making gets easier about what freedom really means to me. Like, because a lot of this stuff can just be built on what society says. And, yeah, with the 20-year-olds romanticizing things, it's like they don't have the life experience to know what these things truly mean or what they entail. And it looks cool on paper, but there is a lot that goes into these things. Ultimately, my message to them is to just just find what you love to do and just get really good at it. And that usually takes care of the details every step of the way. Is you just want to find something you're willing to work at. Through that process, you're going to develop certain skill sets, and then that's going to give you more options. It's being more in the process with things than fixated on a specific result. And so it's, everything takes sacrifices, right? So I need to, and once again, there's no judgment. If I want to belong to the group, if I want to be in that environment, like, that's great, but there's a cost to that too. There's a cost to relying too much on other people. There's a cost to looking to other people to meet your emotional needs for you all the time, because that's not reliable. Like, people can choose to walk away, and then we think that's abandonment, but it's really we were holding expectations for another person that they didn't agree to, right? All these different dynamics, they're extremely interesting. It just comes down to what you value and what type of life you want. My recommendation is don't build your whole life on a wound or wounds. And it may fuel you for a while, but eventually that's going to hit a wall. And, it doesn't matter how much you achieve or how much freedom you have, you probably will still feel empty if you still have all those wounds inside. It's important to eventually face those and work through those. And once you do that, like, your perspective shifts a lot, where you start to see, like, a lot of the things you thought you wanted, you don't really want anymore. A lot, you get more in tune with yourself, and a lot of the superficial stuff starts to fall away. And, it's a bit of a process.
If somebody's listening to us and they're thinking through some of these things and they're like, well, I want to take some steps towards getting, this healthy independence into my life, do you have any, like, I don't know, top 3 or, sort of things that somebody could think about?
So first, we're going to kind of scan your life and figure out what's not working. What do you dread? Like, where do you get a lot of anxiety? What things are you going along with that don't make you feel very good about yourself? And so those are going to be the opportunities. That's going to be the stuff that's going to be showing you where you're not living in alignment. And, I might be building a career that, my parents told me I should build. A lot of that stuff happens where, the things we think we want are connected to the people that raised us. And, those were tools that we worked at. Those were things we worked at in order to get love from our caregivers. They were only proud of me if I was getting good grades and I was, let's say I was in a similar career as them or something of that nature. We want to scan that and see if that's true for you or not. And if it doesn't feel very good, it's probably not true. It's probably something you just went along with. Once we have something that it's just like, yeah, I don't know why I'm doing this. This doesn't really make me happy, but you're going to see that that was kind of trained into you in some way. There was going to be some external influences that planted that seed in you, and they made you believe that's what you wanted. And you believed it because you were disconnected from yourself. So once we find that, then 2 would be, okay, like, I need to ask myself some deeper questions. What is it I truly want? Do I not even know who I am right now? And I might need to do some exploring. We start to find, what are things that excite you? What are things that interest you? What starts to wake up a spark in you that makes you feel life again? Okay. Because if I've just been going through the motions, if I've just been falling in line, I might have, like, really dimmed my spark where I'm not really sure anymore. In that place, I kind of have to just try some things out. I want to follow my excitement. I want to put myself out there in new ways. I just want to shake up the energy. I want to take some new steps that deviate off the path that I'm on currently. As I start to zone into something that I'm really interested in, that it has a pull on me, like, I just want to keep taking that deeper and further. I want to follow that path and see where it leads. And as I'm branching out, I might disappoint other people in my life. There's a lot of kind of invisible expectations placed on us by others. They expect us to fulfill certain roles for them. Anytime we start to branch out from that, like, that's what independence is I'm choosing to disappoint another person, or I'm breaking out of this line of thinking and I'm trying to find my own way. I need to be willing to walk alone in that process. And it's a difficult path, but that's where we're on this journey to find ourselves and to get to know ourselves better. I might feel shame. I might feel guilt. I might feel like I'm doing something wrong. I might feel like I'm stupid for wanting more. Right. And so I need to reconcile those things. And I just need to understand that those are natural thoughts given from where you were operating from. And so we just continue to follow that path until that noise starts to lose momentum, like where it's not as strong on us, where we're not doubting ourselves as much. Because the longer I stay on the path and gain that independence where I can think for myself again, that starts to feel really good. Okay. That's where you get the positive feedback of, I've gone through that first stage of doubting myself and going through the shame of being different or wanting different. On the other side of it, I start to feel more freedom. I start to feel like more possibilities. I start to feel like things are opening for me. And so like once you get a taste of that, it's usually okay. The cloud's gone because I went through that initial phase of kind of shedding the expectations, shedding the beliefs that were placed on me. And in this place, I have this freedom to explore. And then that's where I really start to get in tune with what I want is I'm no longer under the influence of other things and I'm getting clearer and clearer on who I am. And so my body starts to align in tune with that. And so now I can feel a stronger sense of the direction I want to head. And so we just want to continue to follow that path and work through the roadblocks as they come up. But, I've talked about that 50 times on what that looks like. As I expand, I'm going to contract and there's going to be all those things that happen, but that's just your mind trying to pull you back to safety, which is what you know. The patterns you've adopted based on your past, everything that's practiced, it doesn't want to do new things because there might be anxieties and fears underneath that. And so we have to address that to keep moving forward. All these things are intentional. Why I recommend meditation, why I recommend spending time with yourself, creating some sort of practice where you can just be with yourself with nothing else around you, because that's where you can start to hear your inner voice and get really connected to what's right for you. And we're always just trying to grow that inner voice to get stronger and stronger because deep down, you really know what you want. Deep down, you really know who you are. It's just all these things get stacked on top of it and it gets harder and harder to be in tune with that. We need to separate, we need to isolate at times to really get the clarity on what's right for us. That's how we branch out. It's like, I just need to prioritize my time and space. I need to be conscious of what I feed my mind as well. If I'm having a lot of doubt and things like that, I probably want to gravitate towards more encouraging things. I don't want to be like looking at videos about doom and gloom and negative stuff and all the terrible things going on in the world. I want to feed my mind supportive things. I want to try and find people that are have a similar mindset or are doing similar things, heading in a similar direction. And that helps sustain my path. And that makes me feel like I'm not so alone in it as well. Because when we have all the shame going on, we tend to think we're the only ones with that problem. And we tend to isolate and go inward, and then we like just beat up on ourselves. But if we can find other people that are going through something similar, now there's kind of that shared experience, which like really helps us feel seen and heard and understood, which helps make us feel okay about ourselves that, these are just disagreements. This is just, we don't want to be a carbon copy of anybody else. Nobody came here to do that. And unfortunately, a lot of societal structures create this like similar idea of like what life should look like. And so we can of course follow that stuff and that can be very fulfilling, but it's not right for everybody. And if you're listening to this podcast, you probably have felt the call to go deeper. And so that's what we're talking about is like, if that stuff doesn't work for you, there are these other paths. With that, we're trying to free up your mind. We're trying to free up your emotions. We're trying to give you that freedom to explore who you are and understand yourself at a deeper level so that you can align your life in a way that supports you better and is conducive to your happiness and your fulfillment.
Before I have you kind of do a little bit of a wrap on this, I do want to just add to this idea of freedom and that the work that you and I have done together over the past few years, the feeling of freedom for me has come back, if that's the right way to say it, differently maybe than the romanticized version of freedom that people think about. So like that actual feeling comes back. And I think it's a testament to doing this work, to all of the points of the suggestions that you made to work through things, and having someone to go through it with certainly I think made it both easier and faster. So just putting that
Oh,
out there.
and yeah, I think the romanticized idea, I think it is in some way appropriate. It has to be enticing to people in order for them to start to take the steps. But like once you take the steps, like you're confronted with what it really is, and then that ends up just being more work. This is the work I need to do to create the freedom now. But yeah, if I'm not up for that challenge, I can always go back. Right. So yeah, it's just, it's the same things, no matter what you're dealing with. It's your time, energy, and focus you put into something. That's what builds it. If it's something that you don't feel like you quite fit in your current environment, or you feel misunderstood, or you feel like you've had to do everything alone your whole life, like all those things, creates all these walls around us. And what we're really after is this like internal freedom, which is more of a feeling, this freedom to be dynamic, the freedom to move around and pursue what I want. And that means that as I face the challenges, as I face the roadblocks, I face the limitations, I don't see them as permanent fixtures. I see them as something I need to move through and shift my mind about. The more freedom we start to feel, the more when I feel limited, that starts to feel really bad to me. And then that's where we dig in and do deeper work, because it's just okay. Like we can move through this pretty quickly. Your mind's just literally just stuck on something from the past. You have some fixed idea about this that won't allow you to move forward. And so we just need to figure out what that is, and shift your mind about it and heal it. And then you can continue on your path. And so we do all this through the feeling sensation. Our feelings are in tune with everything we've ever lived. Our nervous system's highly efficient. That's how it communicates to us, is through our feelings. Our thoughts are just simply reflections of our past and what we've made up, how we've interpreted the challenges of our life. Like that's what makes up our thoughts. And so I can always change that stuff, but I have to change how I feel about something. And so if I ever feel closed in or shut down, I'm doing that to myself by the way I'm seeing that situation. We can always unlock that. It just takes some adjustments, and we have to be able to feel our feelings. Okay. So if I'm not processing and feeling my feelings, that's what actually builds the prison around my life, is because I start running into all these things that bring up worries, anxieties, and stresses. And that shuts me down, rather than seeing those as feedback of like, oh, I have something unresolved here. We usually view it as this is part of my identity and I must not be destined for more. It's all just seeing the stuff through a different lens. We want the internal freedom, and also to build the confidence to pursue your heart's desires, because that's what makes any of us fulfilled in life.
All right. So let's talk about where people can find you and any other updates you want to share.
If you're curious about this work and would like to experience more freedom and independence, work through some of the situations that make you feel trapped and limited, you can reach out to me on my website, brandonthielk.com, and schedule a free 30-minute strategy session. I get to know a little bit about you and share how I can help. This work literally applies to everything in life without exception. And if you want to register for my newsletter, you can register also on my website. It's the Lightning Report. Send it out weekly, give some updates on the business, some insights for the week, a recap of the podcast. So that's a good place to stay in touch. Also, if you want to follow along on YouTube and Instagram at Brandon Thielk, we post out there regularly. Also at bthielk on TikTok. Please like, subscribe, follow, ask any questions you have. I would love to hear from you and on how I can support you in a bigger way.
Just like always, all of those links will be in the show notes and the video description if you happen to be watching this on YouTube. So,
We'll see you next time.
all right. Talk to you later, Brandon.